Let's do it. Yeah, welcome to Freshly Pressed. That's a YouTube show. It's YouTube only for now, but I hope we expand to other platforms as well. And yeah, welcome, Kristi. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. And thanks a lot for sending me some of the introduction material to Fairy Tales from Mars. It
Oh,
looks
good.
fabulous. I would love to, like I actually love anthologies. Uh, I love anthologies because they have such a big variety of like styles and stories and uh, just so many different perspectives in just one book, right? I would love to get into what was your thought process behind Fairy Tales from Mars, and like what inspired you to start that project.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you should mention anthologies, and you get a different perspective and a lot of different stories. And when you think a little bit about like collections of fairy tales, it's kind of the same thing, right? You've got all these different perspectives, kind of telling these morality tales or cautionary tales, something to impart a lesson, leaving behind from, usually some event from history where these get inspired from. And of course, when you're trying to tell your children, bedtime stories, you also want them to get something out of that. And I think a little bit about short stories, anthologies are kind of like that. You're kind of mining for meaning in this collection of stories. What's the through line? What's the thread? So there's a lot of parallel in those. So I think that really lent well to taking the idea of fairy tales from Mars and turning it into a comic book anthology.
Absolutely. That sounds amazing. And very, very true. I think a lot of fairy tales also come from the fact that these are stories you tell generations, and you pass it on to kids, and they pass it on to their own kids. It's also very cultural. Some cultures are more spoken than others. For example, like in Australia, indigenous Australian culture is very spoken. Their Dreamtime stories are actually fairy tales they tell their kids, and they pass it on to their kids, and the whole culture is passed on like that. Yeah. What like I saw some of them are like really. um I obviously went through some of them. The intro is fabulous.
Thank you.
Uh, what what does like I loved a few things there, like the robotic speech bubble, how you differentiate between the two kinds of speech, the robot speech and a human speech. Um, and like the robot Q2 is such a no-nonsense robot. How did you come up with that character?
Well, so when we were trying to come up with the intro comic, it was mostly designed as kind of a call to action for our creators to kind of give them an idea of what they're compiling for it. And what I really wanted was a something from which the main character, the Scribner, to be bouncing off of. That's the robot has no opinions; it's just the facts. Whereas the Scribner gets to speculate on that and be more imaginative and take the fact and expound upon that. And it's kind of again another analogy, kind of reinforcing that fairy tale where there is the underlying truth, but then there's the fiction built on top of it. Um, so a lot of that was kind of playing on that concept together.
Nice. So is it that Kevin and the Doctor are actually talking to each other and riffing off each other in some way while they're on their journey on Mars?
Yeah, so we're not really going to see a whole heck of a lot of them throughout the course of the story. They're more the setup, the idea that you're about to go on this adventure and you're going to be traveling from colony to colony, but you're not really getting to see that journey. You're seeing the journey through the stories that they're gathering. So that was kind of the idea is that I wanted them to to riff and to communicate and to have a good rapport, because that's the kind of rapport that you want with your audience or with the person to whom you're telling the story. So I wanted to make sure that that got established really strongly, because if you think about it, Kevin is now going to take you on this journey, telling you these stories, these fairy tales from Mars, as you're going over the rover, over this red planet, looking at these colonies dotting the landscape.
No, I actually would love a comic with those two because they're really good characters to start with. So really strong start, I would say.
Oh, thank you so much. I do like them quite a lot. They were very fun when I was trying to think of through what lens do we want to introduce these stories to the audience. I knew I wanted to have a good, to have a buddy experience. You're coming along with these on this journey.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Is it okay if I get into some of the stories?
Please.
I don't want to spoil any of them because I want readers to enjoy enjoy those stories fully. Uh, One thing I loved about Ash's Infinite Fears was that they were internal fears, but she was externalizing them. Oh, sorry, they were externalizing them. I'm
Yeah.
so sorry about that. And obviously Ash is such a effortlessly non-binary character that I love it. Just love that. So yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that we were really very lucky about, and it's not just with Ash's Infinite Fears, but our whole creative team is actually really diverse and global in terms of their experiences. So we got to get a lot of that into our stories without making it a particular focus on what we were trying to do. When Jameson Alcorn, my co-creator, and I were looking at these and kind of gathering these together, we were really impressed at the idea that I think something like this really does attract some of these marginalized voices from all these different spectrums of the world, because those are the folks who are really kind of imagining something more and different and better. They're the ones who are not necessarily benefiting from the status quo. So you can kind of speculate or imagine something different. And that's Ash's Infinite Fears. I mean, they're imagining the whole time, what could this? What about this?
Yeah,
What about
yeah,
this? What
yeah,
about this? And that's the kind of the experience. What could go wrong? Well, anything could go wrong, but what could go right? And that's the real question: is what could go right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the epiphany at the end is amazing. Like, it doesn't matter. Well, they will go for the adventure. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and
And
isn't that what we're all doing?
very, very true. Isn't it like Kickstarter is an adventure in itself, right? Just
Oh gosh, yeah, it sure is. It's a roller coaster. This is my third Kickstarter that I've been kind of one of the drivers of. But I've been in another number of products, and every single time, just heart your throat, you're holding your breath. We're in that stretch, that middle ground where it's just very quiet, and that makes you very nervous.
yeah,
Um, but we hit 50%, which is incredible. What
that's
a great
awesome.
place to be at. Yeah, we're more than halfway there. As a result, we got to show off Jacob Dudek's very, very cool art. We just started posting that on Twitter through a Kickstarter update, which has a phenomenal inked piece that looks just great.
Yeah,
Um, Really captures the imagination, that evocation of the fairy tales from Mars, the fairy tale,
nice.
the sci-fi, the fantasy. It's really cool.
That's amazing. I think that's what fairy tales are, right? Like they are primarily fantasy, but if obviously with Mars, there's a science fiction element to it. So yeah, it spans across several genres. Like there are a couple of them that are actually horror stories. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah, and that's the darkness of like the Grimm fairy tales. There is that history of kind of a gritty, you know, um, tale. That's the real cautionary tales, the ones that are don't go into the woods at night. Don't go into the red planet at night. That
yeah,
kind of a thing.
yeah, exactly. Don't go below. That was the
Yep.
one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Um, yeah, that was a good story actually. That was actually a perfect fairy tale. Actually, origin of a fairy tale, not really a fairy tale in itself, but it was kind of like an origin of a fairy tale. Kind of how like folklore starts. um, experience of one person, that person disappears. What happened?
Right, and then people start to speculate, they start to wonder, then they start to fill in their own blanks. And you think about that a lot in terms of oral traditions. That's how they grow. The first telling of that story was probably the closest to the original fact, but every retelling expands and expands and expands until it is bigger than it ever was.
Exactly, exactly. Uh, I like some of the other ones as well. I love how some of those stories are actually about embracing your fears. For example, Daughter of Phoebus, is it called? Oh, Daughter of Phobos, right?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah, I'm sorry. About some of the mistakes that I'm making while,
Oh,
yeah. So Daughter of Phobos is lovely as well. It's in similar vein, but I think the fears are flipped the other way around, as opposed to Ash's Infinite Fears. What do you think about that?
yeah. So one of the things that we really got to explore was kind of a range of the kinds of initial fears that you kind of embark when you're in the beginning of anything. And that's the whole idea, is that these are the initial colonizations of Mars. You're as far away from home as you can possibly ever be. You're alone. You might be have limited resources. You know it's going to be a long time before you get any kind of real communication back and forth. So a lot of these fears are things that are kind of universal, and you kind of see those pop up through time to time through all of these stories of that isolation, of that fear of like of the unknown, and what are we going to do? And then you get to see with the daughter of Phobos through the eyes of a child, because this isn't just scientists or engineers or anybody going to these planets. Some of them are bringing their families. They this is how you colonize the planet. You raise your family. So those are going to continue to go on. It Came from the dust is another one where, the strain of that kind of life and
Yeah,
how it affects the family unit, which means how it affects the colony unit, which how it affects the planet. Um,
nice.
grows out and out and out. So you'll find that, as different than these stories are, whether they're more on the humorous side or the horror vein, or even more the traditional fairy tale
Fairy
route,
tale, yeah,
you still get that feeling that there is a motif that's being just echoed throughout. And I think that speaks to what we as people think about what it might be like, as the idea of um, living out among the stars, of living on a planet other than ours. We look at the news and the space races going on, and the billionaires try to get out there, and all the stuff that's going on. It's very prevalent and topical.
yeah,
But I think at our core we're all a little bit scared of it. And I think that was really evident in a lot of those stories. Hopeful still, a lot of them
yes.
do have a lot of hope, more so than the fear. But there's that nugget there. And I think that's indicative of a lot of those older fairy tales too, is that there was a nugget of fear around
Yeah.
which they were telling these stories to bring comfort to themselves.
Absolutely. Totally agree with that. And like the thing that actually struck me with Daughter of Phobos was like when it's the second generation, when there's the kid was actually born and raised on Mars, which means Earth was unknown for the kid, and that was the source of fear, not the Mars itself. So
Isn't it
fear
funny
of
how your
unknown.
perspective changes?
Exactly. Yeah. That's lovely. I actually love that. Uh, Even like I think Adam struck me as well, very much, because I'm actually an immigrant, and it struck me as an immigrant story.
Hmm.
Someone who's starting new life in a new place, and there are always actors who actually don't love immigrants, you know. So
Yeah, right.
yeah,
Oh,
kind of struck a chord
absolutely.
with me.
Yeah, we were very lucky with the kinds of stories that we got, and Adam in particular is a really good one, because that rings true on a lot of levels for a lot of different people, on the outside looking in, or the colonization of going to Mars, like that harsh, aggressive, scary environment, hostile environment. That's can be the immigrant experience. You're going to a place where you're not always welcomed by every person that you might encounter. And in fact, some of that negative vocal minority can be so loud and so aggressive and so scary. So that was a very interesting metaphor to see, told through that particular story with that particular lens. Um, because
Yeah.
that's another way to look at it. You're going to this planet that doesn't really want you there. It's not designed
Yeah. Yeah.
so you feel all that oppression and that thing, but you're still trying to carve out a life for yourself because you deserve to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree. It kind of also like a couple of panels on Adam actually reminded me of Total Recall for some reason. Especially the beginning and the end of Total Recall when they walk on Mars.
hmm Isn't it
Y-
funny how that can come through those really classic sci-fi elements? Because I really love sci-fi. I always have. I'm a big comic book fan, big fantasy fan, but man, sci-fi. I got my first Robert Heinlein book when I was in middle school, and I just could not stop. I was just obsessed. Um, and Total Recall is definitely high up there in terms of the like those top. It's silly. I haven't
Yeah,
actually seen the newest Total Recall because the original is so iconic
I
and
know
perfect in the
exactly.
way that it is.
You don't
Um,
need to.
yeah. um, but yeah, I think that it's interesting how evocative other images of Mars and Mars life and how different it can be will come through in other stories like that.
Yeah, absolutely. If your cat wants to make an appearance.
I think he does. Come here, the dude. He's like, well, no, not if you want me to. Oh, there he goes.
Oh, furry friends are
Hello.
always welcome.
Oh, this is the dude. Hi. Wanna come over
What's his
here?
name?
The dude.
The dude. Oh,
Yeah, from the Big
Big
Lebowski.
Lebowski.
Yeah. When
Nice.
I first got him, he just wanted to lay around the house, and I said that he really tied the room together. Like this. And he's also just mostly a very chill cat.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's amazing. Cats for most part are very, very chill.
Yeah, I've been very lucky.
Yeah.
Uh, except he is definitely very interested when I'm working.
Yeah. Nice. I think that's the great thing about a book like Fairy Tale from Mars, right? Like you're building a brand new pop culture, and you definitely reference some of the existing pop culture as well in your books. I'm actually a sucker for finding pop culture stuff in comics and books in general.
Yeah. Well,
But
good. We want that. We want that to there's a little familiarity in it, right? There's that fun feeling of it, but there's also that recognition where you're like, oh, this is someplace I've been. This is, something I know
yeah,
already, and
exactly.
that makes you feel good about it.
Yeah. And yeah, some of these stories need to be told. That's what I love about indie comics as well. There's so much variety of stories. Like people, comics as a medium, anything is literally possible in comics, right? Like you can just do about anything here. It's an open ground. It's fertile for any kind of imagination. And that's what I love about indie comics. People just come with new perspectives, new kind of stories, new kind of uh, new worlds, right? Like you build so many worlds in this just one book.
Yeah, and I think you can take more risks with independent comics than you can kind of with the mainstream these days. You have people who want what they want and they expect what they've been getting. And you see it all the time. Anytime, somebody tries to change the formula, there's a backlash. There's a response to that because people are very uncomfortable with that. Whereas indie comics, we don't have that expectation. We don't have anything like that to really compete against. We just have to be the most imaginative that we possibly can. We're only really competing with ourselves and how great we can do. So that's been really, really great. And I think you can really push the boundaries of what kinds of stories are getting told out there because there's not as much good sci-fi comics out there.
Mm,
Not really, again, on kind of the mainstream. So we get to really push that envelope as much as we can, because that's what sci-fi is all about, is taking risks and, taking those leaps and bounds of your imagination to see what if,
Yep.
wouldn't it be cool if, what if we could do this, and that's a lot of that is independent comics. So there's a lot of parallel in those kinds of things. And then, of course, to tie it all back to Mars, isn't that the biggest risk you could possibly take? You know? So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's really cool to be kind of on the edge of stuff like this. And there's so many other great anthologies and comics out there too that are just doing, again, similar, where you're seeing things like the Sharp Wit anthology right now has a lot of fantasy, but very female driven, that you don't get to see in a not exploitative way. So there's all sorts of things out there right now that really make a big difference, that in the landscape of comics, that I don't know that you would always get doing it outside of something like a Kickstarter or independent press.
Exactly, exactly. And like mainstream comics have their audience. They have, like you said, they have, if you do something different, there's a lot of backlash, or they have their own like set of characters as well, like a lot of them are focused on superheroes, a lot of them are focused on creating certain kind of books. That just limits some of what you can do with that. So, um, you know, uh, like you rightly said, I don't want to repeat anything you said. You just said everything perfectly.
Thank you.
Yeah. What some of your favorite science fiction comics though?
Oh man. So I didn't really get into science fiction comics. There was one in particular, though, that stood out to me. I remember I was really big into X-Men. That was always my big comic book growing up. I was obsessed with the X-Men. And there was a crossover with Star Trek, the original Star Trek. So you've got Captain Kirk and Spock and all of them, but with like Cyclops and Beast and all of them, trying to, have this adventure together. And I'd never really read a sci-fi comic prior to that. And it kind of launched me into kind of reading a lot of tie-ins with a lot of the franchises that I like a lot, Alien, Star Trek, Star Wars, those types of things.
Yeah,
I really dug I guess not a long time ago, but a while ago, they put out a comic book called, I believe it's called The Star Wars, and it was based on like some of the original scripts that got kind of scrapped by George Lucas, with
interesting.
Anakin Starkiller and Luke Skywalker and all these kind of interesting variations of these characters. And that was really cool because there's that, you've got already this established sci-fi universe, and then that's getting imagined upon, well, what
Yeah,
if this instead? It's like, wow.
yeah,
And I think that's what always really gets me about sci-fi,
nice.
is that sci-fi isn't afraid to be huge and to be outlandish and to try to continue to build upon itself. And it's a really cool genre and something that has always appealed to me about that kind of thing.
Absolutely. One of my favorite ones more recently is Paper Girls. Uh,
Oh, yeah.
Now that it has a TV show, it's getting more popular, but it's already like a big series, and I love Paper Girls. I wish it had, like, obviously the comics came before Stranger Things. I wish the
Hmm.
TV series came before the Stranger Things, it would have
Yeah.
been a much bigger thing, if that was the case.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you should mention Paper Girls, because that kind of brought me back to almost that kind of era of independent comics. Kelly Sue DeConnick's Bitch Planet was really fun. I don't know if you ever got a chance to read that. That was some,
No, I haven't read
she
it.
started doing that kind of concurrently when she was doing Captain Marvel for a while. And that was a really interesting kind of a distant future where women who were not compliant would ultimately be reprimanded until finally they were sent away to this planet, this essentially this prison planet for not being a perfect model woman based on what society's needs are. Um, and that's something science fiction gets to do in a way that other genres don't often get to, is you get to kind of posit these extremes. Um, so blending something, coming back to fairy tales from Mars, blending something where you're always pushing the envelope with a genre like a fantasy or a fairy tale, which tends to be a little bit more on the micro level, is a really fun and interesting balance that I think we did a pretty good job with, in terms of gathering those kinds of stories. They're big and they're epic tales of science fiction, but at their core, they're still telling these stories that were all very relatable.
Absolutely. No, I think both of you did a great job at collecting these stories, and kudos to obviously both the writers and the artists who have done a great job. I think some of the artwork is gorgeous, especially like I don't want to pick favorites. Yeah, but my favorite one was Adam. I think the artwork in Adam is just stunning. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, Vitali's art and voice is just really incredible. We were very lucky to have him submit, and right off the bat, he was very on board with our theme. He was very enthusiastic about it. He had the script of the story done probably faster than almost anybody else on the whole project. You could tell that Adam is just a labor of love, from somebody who is very talented, because Vitali does everything on that whole project. That's a total solo effort, and boy,
Yeah.
gosh, it's incredible. It's gorgeous.
That's amazing. I was also a part of an anthology of a couple of no 3 or 4 years back actually. Monster Mashup. I don't know if you have
Oh,
ever crossed that one. It was I think a public anthology of public domain monster characters.
yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty good. Good experience. Yeah, we lost Eddie recently. I think last year, the one who was
Oh,
running. Yeah, it was a shame. We're really sad about that. But
yeah.
yeah, he was a great guy and ran a very nice anthology. So, but yeah, anthologies are so much fun. Just
Yep.
writing.
And mashups are great. Like, I really love the idea of taking those kinds of things, taking these really common or recognizable elements and finding the places where they organically blend, is really nice. And I think anthologies get to do that again on a level that other stories and other kind of books can't, because you've got kind of one vision or one thing that you're trying to accomplish, whereas the anthology, we get to put it into pieces and to line it up for you in such a way, um,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
the, the
I
the the
agree.
the sum is greater than its parts, but each part is really incredible on its own.
Yes, and that's the hard part as well because it, the good part about anthologies are it's different in a way that when you're a writer you have to tell a story in you have so many restrictions like you're like you have to tell a story in like maximum of 8 pages or you can't have full page spreads more than one full page spread or something like that you get to get more you get to do more creative things tell your story more creatively get your point across in a much more focused way. And I love that about anthologies. Like as a writer, those restrictions actually make you write better stuff as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You're forced to, right? You suddenly have this, you know, very very specific amount of space into which you want to put the best thing you could possibly make. And that kind of breeds innovation in a lot of ways. You think around it in a lot of ways, trying to be like, well, how do I get maybe this very simple concept done in an abstract way? Or how do I boil down this really abstract concept into just a couple of pages? It's really incredible, the way that our teams really tackled these together, because we had, um, the the writers bring in and they wrote their scripts and sent those in to us, and then of course pairing in these artist teams, to interpret these stories and watching them come to life, in ways. We had stories that started out in kind of one format but ended up kind of evolving through the process of working with a team and kind of seeing where everybody's strengths were, to the end result being something that none of us could have imagined solo. And that's beautiful. It's incredible.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the hardest job on an anthology is of that of the editor, because editor has to go through so much stuff and make the stories focus, to the actual theme and all the constraints and stuff like that. Are you the editor on this book?
Yeah, Jameson and I are kind of co-editing this particular project together. I came to him after watching an anthology on Netflix. I believe it's called Myth and Monsters, and that was all about storytelling and the history of storytelling, and these classic elements. And that's kind of what got me thinking a lot of, well, if these are the way that these fairy tales were developed locally, what would that even look like on another planet? How would those stories and those tall tales evolve in that level? So I went to Jameson and I sent him a message and I was like, got an idea for you, fairy tales from Mars. And he was like, let's do it. Got to got to do this comic. Um, he had done anthology before with the Pub Crawl anthology and Bad Neighbor Comics. I had never actually, I'd been in anthologies before, but I'd never led one or edited one before. So it was a really great learning experience, kind of leaning on him, having done this before and gone through the process of contacting artist teams and negotiating contracts, and going in and giving feedback to these books, saying no to some of these really incredible teams, because boy, we got such an amazing turnout for submissions for this particular book. Almost every no we made was begrudgingly, because everything was just so strong and so good, and we ended up bringing things together that really, as you noted, there are themes that you kind of see echoed throughout the story, and we picked ones that we felt supported each other best. But that's really was the criteria we had, because everything was just so good. And I think that's a testament to the concept, to the idea. I think everybody, has fond memories of what fairy tales that they loved growing up, and their imagination, and then you spark your imagination. So what if? And
Yeah.
that's really where you get to see these creators shine, is where they get to take this concept and then expand upon that and bring in their experiences and their loves and their fears and their hopes and imaginations all into this one concept.
Absolutely. And I believe right from the intro, all the stories flow into each other really, really well. I think that it ties really well with the theme of the book. I would urge anyone who's even thinking of funding it to fund it right away and get a copy of this book.
Yeah, absolutely. We are so proud of it. It's so beautiful. It looks so great. And then that's just the book itself. I mean, supporting the Kickstarter, you have the opportunity to get other types of rewards. We have this gorgeous challenge coin that people just can't get enough of, which has got a very cool image. Jameson designed that, and it's just very, very neat, very evocative of that kind of imagination, that call to wonder, that comes from. Sierra Barnes's variant cover is just stunning. So we've got
Nice.
the main cover, which has that kind of pulpy sci-fi feel to it. You've got our big rover in the background, and that kind of thing. And then Sierra's variant cover is a little softer. It has more of that fairy tale feel and a little bit more evocative of kind of something a little old fashioned, but then you get these pops of these sci-fi images throughout, which is just so cool. Um,
That's so
so there's
cool.
that. Jacob Dudix, like I mentioned kind of earlier out in the show, his commissioned art is just stunning. We're so proud of that. It was just the other day. He was like, "Hey, I did it! Here, look at that!" And our jaws dropped. It was so fun and cool. And that's going to be a limited offer, only
Yeah.
available through the Kickstarter if we get funded. So, lots of really neat, awesome things coming on through just the rewards themselves. And we actually just added a tier where you get to not only get a copy of the book for yourself, but you can also get one donated to your local library or school. One of the things that's so important is getting things out there that are going to inspire the imagination. If you look at technology today and you're like, gosh, sometimes it just feels like Star Trek. Well, almost everybody who's designing tech today grew up watching Star Trek. That's where a lot of this comes from. And that's why
Yeah.
what gets this into, Young Hands is an all ages book where we wanted to inspire people to think what if and what could life be like on Mars, because we're not very far away anymore.
Absolutely. I actually love those donate to your local library rewards because um, it growing up, I loved libraries. I've spent so much time in them, just reading and playing Legos and doing so many different things there. Like it's unbelievable. So yeah, I just love libraries and always like if it goes in a local library, it's going into hands of some kid and it's going to spark their imagination.
Absolutely. I love the library. I think they give you resources that you might not otherwise have available to you. Growing up, we didn't have a lot, but being able to go to the library to read books or to have a little bit of social interaction or to just be somewhere where you're not expected to spend money. There's not a lot of places where there's not a social contract where you spend money, and that's
It's
something
true.
that is really important, is to get the things, and not just the most important things, but also the entertainment. People deserve to have access. Um, so that was always something that was very important to me. And so far, all of the Kickstarters I've done have had some kind of a variation of this. Important to get things out there that kids might otherwise not have access to. And with graphic novels, that's usually the hands into which it's getting, the teens, the young adults, those types of folks who are on the cusp or on the verge of something.
Yeah,
And here's something to perhaps spark something new, a new thought, a new idea.
that's awesome. Yeah, that's amazing. Um, yeah, one last thing. And
Yeah.
anthologies are also great for, like the new writers, right? Like did you get any new talent into your anthology, like somebody who was a first time writer or an artist?
I probably have, but I can't think of it off the top of my head, and I feel like the worst editor on the planet. Um, I'm very sure we probably are somebody's first, and I cannot think of it. I will, when you post this on here, I'll make sure to be one of the first comments with a correction for you, because I can't think of it off the top of my head. But you're right. Some of these anthologies are the first ways you get your stuff out there. My first work before putting out my own book was via anthologies. So many people start
Yeah,
that way because that's a great foot in the door. You get to experience kind of a wealth of new talent, and you get to see them kind of rise up as they, you know, build their
absolutely.
portfolios through these types of stories.
Yeah, I totally agree. And like it's a very safe space. You have like editors are very, very friendly most of the time, like they're very generous in terms of helping these people who are new to the craft and help them hone their craft as well. And I've participated in a couple of anthologies and always walked away with so much learning, just so much learning. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well, we
yeah,
want it to look as best as humanly possible too. We want you to put your best foot forward. That's what we're here to do, is to elevate this
exactly.
thing that you've brought us. We loved it to begin with. Now we want to take it to this next level so that we can bring it to a broader, bigger audience, because that's what they deserve. This whole team deserves to have this book made because they're so incredible. They've worked so hard. They're making such beautiful art. And it's my job and it's Jameson's job to elevate that, to lift it up, to get it to as many people as we possibly can, to make sure that the final product is as beautiful and as perfect as we possibly can, because it's representative. It's going to go into their portfolio. It's going to be part of their bibliography eventually. When they're looking back at their list of accomplishments very early on, I'm hoping fairy tales from.
I
Oh
think
my gosh, got it. So, yeah, like I was saying, when it comes to anthologies and independent anthologies, is that you get to introduce to the world these new creatives who are coming up with new stories and new ways of telling these stories. And what I'm very hopeful to be a part of is the development of these new and upstart creators, is because when they get to look back kind of on the landscape of their work and the things that they've done, hopefully they'll be able to count Fairy Tales from Mars as one of those launching points of their budding careers.
That's awesome. And I think a lot of people would really, really appreciate that. Yeah. Thanks a lot for your time today, Kristi. And I really appreciate you coming out and, talking about
Yeah.
Fairy Tales from Mars.
Oh no, this was really great. It was really great to meet you and to talk about. I mean, this is my favorite thing to talk about. I love making comics. I love talking about them. I love showcasing new people and, you know, existing talent out there. We've got some really great people who have done lots of other great things too, not just the newcomers. So yeah, really excited to share this with the world and to spark everyone's imagination with Fairy Tales from Mars.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's my favorite thing to do as well. Talk about comics, reading comics, talk about pop culture, with
Yeah.
fantastic people like you. Yeah, on that note, do check out the campaign and fund it as fast as you can.
Thank you very much.
See ya.